So I need to press go live in Firefox. And I can do the chat on there. Okay, so that should now start in a minute.
Yeah.
With that 30-second delay.
Standing by.
Which it has. Great. Okay. So I guess we just wait to see if people connect. Yeah. Oh, good. Okay, Sid figured it out. So, oh yeah, for first year students, you don't need to join the Slack call all the time necessarily, unless you want to be on audio and stuff. If you are on the Slack call, just make sure you mute your microphones, and I'll just keep Emma pinned for now. But you don't need to be on the Slack call. You can do it all through YouTube. Oh, great. Okay, people are joining. All right, so that means that they found the link through the channel, because I wasn't sure how live streams appear, because I've never done a live stream. So we're going to give it a couple of minutes for people to join the stream, and then I will do a small introduction, and then Emma will talk a bit about the projects, and then we'll play these video essays from the projects. So we'll give people till 5 past max. Oh, thanks, Sid. Sid is asking about my streaming ways. Yeah. Well, if I was able to go into campus, I would have like a really cool device to control things even more. At the moment, it's lots of mouse clicking. But yeah, I can tell you about how I've set it up. The most annoying thing is I can hear myself.
That's the worst.
So, yeah. I've got used to the sound of my own voice now, but it's the delay that freaks me out. And you'll hear me drinking my coffee.
Nice.
Great. So yeah, welcome everyone who's joining. I can sort of see numbers of people coming in, which is great. And obviously the event is recorded anyway onto YouTube, so we'll leave it on there for people to comment on and review as well. Everyone's got like different YouTube names, so I don't know who any of these people are, but I can kind of guess from what they're saying.
I can relate to Buster Zombie Dog. The butterfly feeling of seeing yourself on screen.
Yeah. Oh, great. There's a bunch of third years coming in. Brilliant.
Hey, Max.
Okay. You now giving yourself away to everyone on the internet. I don't know how, is a live chat persistent in terms of it's down the web forever?
I'll try and speak closer to the computer. Or maybe
okay.
Adam, you can crank me up.
I think you are up loud enough. Maybe just check system preferences sound. Sometimes it's on like 3/4 the mic. And I have the microphone like literally next to my mouth, so I will probably always be louder than you.
Yeah, I think I've got my mic's all the way up.
Okay,
But
fine.
I'm just using the microphone, so I probably should have put in my external one. But hopefully, yeah, I'll just articulate and use sign language. I wish I could speak sign language. I cannot.
Yeah, it looks okay. It looks as high as mine.
Okay.
But maybe just project, I guess. Okay, look, it is 5 past, so we're going to get started. I'm going to do a very brief intro. So thanks everyone for joining this live stream. The first thing to say is it's the first time we've done this type of complicated live stream. I've done a few silly live streams of sort of final year stuff, but nothing that organized. So obviously we've done this because we can't go on campus and we can't have a full in-person arcade event where we sort of play students' games and provide some feedback and commentary on those projects. So hopefully everything will work fine. If it goes wrong, it goes wrong. We will learn. Everything is learning. So the only other thing I really want to say is that this project and the stuff you're seeing is like a 6-week project maximum. It's first year students. First time many of them have engaged with something like Unity and to produce a screen-based game. And so they were tasked with some specific things to do this. But again, what we would like in this event is for those who are watching the stream to provide some comment and feedback, that helps the students think about and reflect upon the project for the semester just before the hand-in, which is next in a week's time. So there's will be opportunities for them to think about what they might have done differently, what they would like to improve, those kind of things from feedback. I mean, Emma will talk a bit more about what we wanted this event to be and what it normally is in terms of feedback session from players. Obviously, this is a slightly different version. So yeah, there's that. And of course, the elephant in the room is that we've been teaching in quite extreme circumstances, as I'm sure everyone in the world knows. And in the UK, obviously, we've suffered another full-on lockdown. So we had to, again, flip everything closed and work with students just remotely. And when students are working in teams, particularly for the first time remotely, this has been a lot of learning for them really fast. So I think it's going to be valuable as we go forward with probably more remote working just because people have found that it does work generally. So that's good. But I know that it's been hard with lots of students, having to do tests for corona, maybe getting the virus, etc., etc., staff. So yeah, it's been a really busy and exciting semester, but lots of external pressures, obviously. So Emma, I think that's probably all I'm going to say.
Yeah,
Other than I'm excited to see these video essays and that kind of stuff. And so, yeah, I think I'm going to just hand over to you.
cool. Okay, yeah, thanks. And yeah, thanks so much for everyone like who is joining in the chat. I think it's mainly a lot of third years. So I was gonna start by basically describing what this event would have been had we not been in a lockdown. But actually, seeing as you're like third years and second years, you probably know better than me what it would have been. But yeah, in theory, this was going to be a live in-person event. Remember those? They're something from our pre-pandemic past where people would get together in the meet space, drink a few beers, interact with people who are not just their spouse or their like highly anthropomorphized cats in my case. But yeah, obviously, as Adam said, that's not been possible this year, along with many things that are not being possible this year. So this was our kind of like halfway solution to that. So we're trying to recreate the same experience of the arcade, but virtually. And obviously, when you, as you guys know, as game designers, when you translate things from the real world into the virtual simulated world, you have to pick and choose which elements and aspects you want to emphasize and focus on, because obviously a simulated world can never fully capture the real world. So in this instance, the two things from the arcade experience that we want to try and replicate are, number one, the getting of the feedback. And obviously, again, in the process of game design, there is nothing more valuable than having a bunch of people in good spirits with the right expertise and knowledge coming in and messing around with your prototype. Not going to get to do that today, but our halfway solution, as I said, is to get your feedback in the chat. So yeah, you guys are experts, especially y'all in your third year who've actually done this specific project. So you really have a kind of good intimate knowledge of what the aims were. So yeah, your feedback is really, really encouraged and appreciated. As Adam said, please bear in mind that these are first year students. They only had 5 weeks on this project, and they had to do it all remotely, no studio time together and that kind of thing. Some people working across like different time zones even, so it's been pretty difficult. But it's still constructive feedback, really, really welcome. And the second thing is, of course, like celebrating the fact that they've completed semester 1 and that they have something to show for their time and their term. So again, bringing that celebratory vibe into the chat would be great, whether that's just like a celebratory emoji or anything else that you think the guys might appreciate in terms of encouragement and joy, essentially. So again, I will outline the project that we're going to be showing, as in I'll talk through the brief. I know that some of you already know what it was, seeing as you did it. But the thing that we changed this year, so it's Project Hitchbrick. And traditionally in the past, it's been looking at films by these two great auteurs, Hitchcock and Kubrick, and kind of being like a magpie, sort of pillaging all the shiny bits from those films in order to use them as inspiration for a game mechanic, which is then prototyped. But this year, it's me kind of just sticking my head in, but I was like, hey, what about if we diversify the film lineup a little bit? And Adam was really like, obviously super receptive to that. So the first years this year watched films by Spike Lee. They watched Do the Right Thing, 1989, iconic film in many ways. And obviously Spike Lee is definitely an auteur in the same league as Kubrick and Hitchcock. We did still watch Rear Window, so 1954, gonna get these dates right. And The Shining, which is one of my all-time favorite films, so I couldn't not have that. So that was Kubrick's 1980 film. Then we did Ida Lupino's The Hitchhiker from 1953. Again, it's another black and white masterpiece, a kind of, the ultimate lesson in how to create cinematic tension and claustrophobia that kind of, I think, gets replicated so many times in contemporary films. And it's really good, I think, to be able to root it back to this, this female director from the 50s who kind of really played the system in a man's world and produced some pretty amazing stuff. And finally, and this was the one that I think I had to convince Adam about the most, was Clueless, directed by Amy Heckerling from 1995. And in my opinion, Clueless is as iconic as, any of the other, as The Shining or anything else. Not because it's from, a high art genre. It's not a psychological thriller. It's a chick flick, basically. But I think it's really good to kind of interrogate our gender biases and kind of, some kind of creative internalized misogyny when we say what is and is not art. Because if you think about it, not only did Clueless like start a movement in terms of it had a whole bunch of us wearing knee-high socks again, even though I was not at school anymore. But also, like, you would not have things like Mean Girls, like, which again I think is iconic, 2000s movie, and that whole heritage of like super funny, witty satire, basically, contemporary social satire. If you didn't have Clueless, so that was my defense for why we have that one.
I think it's got to be fair to say that I like the film Clueless a lot. I was just concerned that it wouldn't work in terms of the project. That was all.
No, totally, and I get that. But I think again, like the whole point is thinking about how we can move from film to game, and so it's all this kind of like transmedial thinking where we're looking for the ludic in the filmic, we're looking for the ludic in the literary. And if you look at what games, I'm not talking about what console games or like PC games are popular right now, but if you look at browser games and you look at apps, mobile apps, fashion games, doll dress up games, visual novels that center around picking the right romantic partner, that's where the money's at. And that's where like there's the kind of most growth and boom in the industry. Also, it's where you have a lot of, oh man, I set myself up to say something bad. It's where you have a lot of very commercialized games which don't have huge amounts of artistic integrity. So I think it's, again, really good to have the next generation of game creators essentially think through the fashion game, for example, and think about how you can have an iconic, masterpiece like Clueless as a film. How can we have an iconic masterpiece that is Kim Kardashian's Hollywood? But yeah, I think that's a pickle. That's a challenge.
No, and I think Emma, that's really good because in the School of Art, fashion is really interested in games. fashion management are coming to give a talk to the first years about the re-experiencing retail using game techniques and stuff. So it definitely all fits in terms of the broader application of games as art, games that engage with people that are not necessarily in that commercialized sector.
Right. And we're only one step away from seeing the fashion industry fully gamified, in the sense that nowadays, especially again, virtual times, they're relying on influencers on Instagram, on TikTok, and so on to sell their products much more than they are relying on, say, like magazine ads or billboards or shop fronts even. And there is already that inherent gamification. If you're an influencer and you want to get 1,000 likes on the picture of your handbag, you have to almost use gamified strategies, whether that is, a competition, like, oh, share this post with a friend and you might win a lipstick or whatever, or whether it's like some other maybe deeper, more strategic level of gamification. So yeah, anyway, don't know why I'm ranting about Clueless, but Clueless, great film. Moving on. So we're going to kick off now. I'll stop talking and we'll actually get the guys to share their videos, or Adam's going to share the videos that they've made.
I'm going to do it.
Then to say, we flipped this last minute. We kind of hedged our bets a little bit, thinking maybe we can do the arcade in person. And then, a few weeks before, we were like, right, it's not going to happen. Let's do video essays. And we had 1 day session training for how to make a video essay. And honestly, we could have done a 12-week course on it. So we absolutely steamed through it, and the guys did amazingly. And honestly, from that one session, the videos that some people made just really blew me away. I will give individual shout outs later, but just to say, there's a lot of raw talent there that can definitely be transformed into an amazing YouTube channel, gaming essay channel, which I would 100% subscribe to. So yeah, really impressed with everything that I saw. But that said, do bear in mind that these are first passes at creating video content about games. So first up, we have Sapling Studios, who are going to be sharing their prototype. So again, they've taken an action from a film, a movement in a source film. In their case, it was The Shining, and they've transformed that into a game mechanic. And they're going to obviously tell you how they did that. This is Dylan, Steph, and Kat. Next up, we have Intuis Mortuis. I've been told that's how to pronounce it correctly, with their game also called Intuis Mortuis. I think they just wanted me to say it twice, mess up the pronunciation twice. Just kidding, guys. So that is Amy, Ed, and Jake. And then we have Overlooked Content. The studio is named Overlooked Content, and their game Mr. Knock with Phil, Marine, and Tim. After that, Neurotech with their game Situation Isolation, Kyle, Max, and Simon. And finally, we're going to end with Writings with their game What Would You Do? And the studio is composed of Sophie, Alex S, Alex T, and Logan. So take it away, guys. Let's see what you made.
Okay, so if I press all the right buttons, it should all just work. So here we go.
You have been isolated. You are endangered. There's one key thing you must do. Escape. Talk with your captor, your father. Sneak behind his back as you find your way out without arousing suspicion from his frantic mind. Or else you might never leave his house. You must break out. Hello, I'm Dylan, and I've been working together with my teammates Steph and Katrina to develop a vision and prototype for our game Breakout. We started working on the game in late November as part of our first semester in game design and art. We took the inspiration for the core of the game from the Stanley Kubrick film The Shining. We went through a variety of ideas, drawing inspiration from different aspects of the film until we could agree on one we were happy with. Our final concept decided on, which ended up as the core of the game, has the intended focus on the aspects of isolation, dysfunctional father-son relations, and psychopathy, which all display themselves in the film. The game has the core narrative of a son going to his mentally unstable father's house, and the son finding himself in need to escape his father. Our members skilled in art, Steph and Katrina, did sketches of the rooms in the house and of the two characters, developing the character sketches to try and make their physical characteristics reflect their psychology, and make the house have a fitting atmosphere for the tone of the game. Meanwhile, I began to work on the level design and started to produce the playable prototype. Throughout the process of development, there were multiple bumps that we went through. Firstly, there was the issue of the pandemic, resulting in our team being completely remote. None of our members were able to meet in person with each other. This made communication and teamwork more difficult than it could have been without those issues, as well as meaning only one person, myself, was able to play the prototype properly since everyone was separate from each other. There was also factors in some of our team members' personal lives that affected their ability to work as efficiently. I myself had a couple of things go on. However, we were able to develop enough to get an idea of what the final product might look like, doing coloured and refined drawings of the characters and environment. Additionally, the narrative, level design, and dialogue in the prototype would be significantly more polished and refined to ensure the player is able to feel unease, tension, and sympathy for the protagonist, whilst having fear of the antagonist, whilst hopefully being able to understand their motivations. Now we get into the prototype part. I will warn ahead of the process that the dialogue is going to be jumpy at times, sometimes skipping through, unfortunately. In the actual game would obviously not be like that, however I was not able to fix it in the prototype. But regardless, I will go over what I do have for the prototype and its content. Right now, what you are seeing in front is a bit of a description giving context to before the gameplay of the prototype begins, telling you how you've been dropped off by your mother to your father's house you haven't seen in a while, and it gives you first impression of how there's something a little bit off about him and how his house is poorly kept. It will also give you the method of escape, saying how he locks the door and has keys which will be put around the house. As you'd play the prototype, you would experience the core of the game, which is trying to escape the house through both sneaking and dialogue with the father. There's a few puzzle elements that will play through to help you reach your goal. Sometimes you might make a mistake, which doesn't necessarily make you lose, but does make your time more difficult. Now what's happening here, I'm going through the game quite fast, just since the dialogue goes quickly. What you see there is I'm able to unlock the first one because it is the prior mentioned sliding padlock, however the other two I could not. I need to find the keys for those ones. First thing I'm doing here is talking with my father. It is going to unfortunately skip over the dialogue there. It will show it after the options, but to give a brief summary, it's basically he seems relatively relaxed with me when I approach him. However, I say I forgot what I wanted to talk to him about, and that's going to result in him, due to his paranoia, becoming kind of uncomfortable and being a bit more on guard than he was before. This is part of a suspicion mechanic, which is one of the things that make it a bit harder to recover from failures as you play the game. What I'm doing here is I see his wallet on the side, and I'm going to reach slowly, hoping that whilst he's looking at the TV, he won't pay attention to the slow motion. That is going to be the successful method, and if I had gone fast, he would have realized as I went too swiftly. By going slow though, I'm able to look inside the wallet and I will find a key which I wanted to get to unlock one of the locks which are on the door. So now I have one key and I just need to find the other one. Now obviously I myself know where that key is, so once I'm done with this I'm going to go straight to it. As I mentioned, one of the key mechanics which contribute to difficulty is the suspicion. Currently there's no display of it, however it is there, and it does grow as you play, and it's currently just being demonstrated as dialogue changes. You'll see this when I next talk to the father. What I do here is I go up the ladder, and I know that the other key is in this cupboard, so I open it up. Now I want to take the ladder because I can't reach one of the keys, but the game is telling me that my father hears me as I grab it, and what does a 9-year-old want to do with moving a ladder somewhere? So my father's about to have a go at me, and this increases his suspicion of me. So now I move over to him and I talk to him again, and it's going to show here, although it's going to skip again, that his approach to me and how he feels is a bit more different. He's more paranoid now. This also happens in the way that suspicion is easier to increase the more crazed state he is in, which progresses throughout the game. So you can make less mistakes without suspicion going up. If suspicion goes too high, that is when you lose the game. Sometimes suspicion will be maxed out if you make a severe enough mistake as well. However, I do not make any of those kind of mistakes. Now I asked him to go get something from upstairs so that I can grab the ladder quickly and then go over to the door. I'm going to go grab the ladder, put it down, and I unlock the door, escaping the front door. Now that we've completed the project to this point, there's quite a bit to reflect on if we were to continue the project or redo it. We certainly could have communicated as a team better, even when putting in consideration how the pandemic affected our ability to do so. If we were to continue the project, making the next prototype include art from drawings as part of the animations, and adding background music would make significant improvement to the player experience, as well as making dialogue more refined. Thank you for watching our video essay, and please feel free to give any feedback on both your positive first impressions and your criticisms of the prototype. Son.
Has Purgatory always been this cute? Well, that's what Intuis Mortuis investigates, a game with a unique view on what the afterlife is like. Travel through the world completing puzzles and challenges one after the other as you go on your soul journey, avoiding obstacles and a swift trip to the underworld ahead of your time. When we were choosing which film to use, based on our brief, a lot of focus was on which film would be easiest to code for, which one has the most basic movement, since no one on our team has a coding background. We decided that this film would be The Hitchhiker. The main movement of the film is the car travelling from one side of the screen to the other, similar to a side-scroller. There was also a lot of focus on the environmental aspects of the film. An article we found said that the director, Ida Lupino, used the desert and forest the film takes place in to create a sense of isolation and loneliness, something we looked towards creating in our first rendition, almost as if the environment was a secondary antagonist. We also chose The Hitchhiker for the aesthetics, the contrast between light and dark, characters in purgatory between life and death. We knew that we could work on something based upon this idea because we were all fans of the narrative games, so it will produce the most drive in all of us. We knew we wanted Intuis Mortuis to be a game for all levels and abilities, so originally our vision on this world was a narrative-driven 64-bit side-scroller of a soul in the form of a wisp. We spent a lot of time designing our character, looking at different forms a wisp could take on, and how we could represent a spirit in pixel form. Our wisp travels through the scroller on a path, exploring the world's joys and darkest sides as it encounters memories to evoke both emotions. While on this journey, it would find clues and puzzles that would shift the colour of the world from black and grey to a more colourful spectrum, depending on which memory is found. At the end of the journey, the soul would find its own dead body, and with clues from the journey, the wisp would learn how it had died along the same journey it took the player on. At the end, the player would have a choice: acceptance or denial. If the player accepted their death, you would leave Purgatory and complete the game. If you denied your death, the player would then start at the beginning again, but with a more difficult puzzle and challenge to prevent the player from reaching the end. Unfortunately, we ended up having to hit the reset button. We focused too heavily on the narrative, so much so that we had no actual interesting mechanics to engage the players with, which would have ultimately resulted in a poor game experience that would be boring and monotonous. So, then we produced what we have today. Still a soul in Purgatory, but now with the ability to change colour from blue and red, and size, twice as big or half its size, which it would need to complete puzzles and traverse on platforms in the world. This was helped by our paper prototypes which we created. What we came up with during that task heavily influenced our decision in going forward with our new idea.
We also wanted our game to be as accessible as possible, so we looked into colour blindness, and which colours had good contrast, but also fit with the aesthetics of the game. Originally, we had planned on using red, taking inspiration from Sin City, and green, but soon realised this might be a struggle for those with red-green colour blindness. Unsurprisingly, colours that turned out to have good contrast were red and blue. The player can also use either the WASD keys or the arrow keys to control the movement, and the spacebar to jump. We playtested the game amongst people of all ages and abilities to ensure that everybody could enjoy the experience. A lot of people didn't like the fact that they had to start over again when they died, but we thought we added incentive to keep on playing, to find out what was at the end of the game. And that held true. Everybody we tested on wanted to keep playing even after dying.
With our new idea in mind, we decided to delegate our team into separate roles. This saw Amy taking up the task of coding, Jake as the level designer and concept artist, and Ed as the jack of all trades helping us with everything else in between. Even though we all had our separate roles, development was still a bumpy process as lockdown made it much harder to sync up our work. There was also the fact that no one in the team had any significant coding experience, which was a hurdle in and of itself, meaning we had to get a lot of help to achieve what we wanted.
When coding, I started with the main mechanic, the size and colour change. I was surprised to find out that there wasn't a tutorial anywhere online for this, so I had to rely on James for that. Then I coded for basic movement, and hit another hurdle when I couldn't get my player to even jump. After this though, everything went surprisingly smooth, with the respawn mechanic and transitioning from scene to scene as the player traverses onto the next levels. I just had to duplicate my scripts onto other assets in the game, and our 3 levels were complete.
Because we had kept our original idea of using a wisp, character development was plain sailing. Since wisps don't exist, we had to find plenty of references for our animations. We looked into the movement of flames and how best to show this in an animation. We played around with shape and form and how the player would go from their usual size to larger, and how we could animate a colour change. Surprisingly, level design was pretty difficult as well. But after all the blood, sweat and tears and the many tissues that we went through as a team, this is what we can show for our efforts. We were going to add our sprites and assets to the game, but this didn't go too well. Our prototype demo shows the main mechanics of our game, i.e. changing size and shape. Three puzzle platform levels, physics elements that the player must interact with at a certain size, and obstacles that can kill the player, putting them back at the very start of the game. At the start of the development process, a lot of us weren't too proud of what we had achieved, but looking back on what we have achieved now, and how difficult it actually was to get here, our view has changed. Let us know what you think, as this really does help us with working out what could be better in our projects in the future. Thank you for watching.
Have you ever wanted to bash down some doors in true Here's Johnny style? Then this is the game for you. Welcome to the Endless Runner, where you, equipped with your weapon of choice, whether that be Jack's iconic axe or a terrifying chainsaw, are able to break through as many doors as you possibly can. We are Overlook Content, and we are here to present our game, Mr. Knock. For this project, we were given a brief to use a character or camera movement from an iconic film to inspire a player interaction. We were inspired by Stanley Kubrick's The Shining, based on a novel by Stephen King, and specifically the movement where Jack Torrance swings his axe into the bathroom door. Originally, we had a few different ideas for games, ranging from different genres such as action, where we considered creating a game similar to Hotline Miami, where you play as Jack and need to kill as many people as possible. This game would have focused on being fast-paced and breaking down doors to other rooms to kill more people, and get a higher score. One of our main inspirations for this game was the footage from the film where Jack slams his axe into the door, as this was a big moment in the film that was very impactful and memorable. We also looked to strategy games as inspiration, and looked into a hotel management system that would be similar to games like Roller Coaster Tycoon and even Sims. This idea was explored in more depth, and we eventually had a concept that was more akin to that of a Dungeon Keeper series, where the player controls the Overlook Hotel from The Shining and has to manage customers. The aim of the game was to then trap customers in different rooms, and the hotel would consume them as its food source. Though this idea was interesting, and we may explore it further in the future, it was deemed too difficult and complex to produce in such a short time frame, and it didn't explore the idea of movement, which was key for this project. Eventually, we decided on the concept of an endless runner, where the player has to break down doors to progress. In a way, this mirrors the experience of being Jack in the film, as the hotel is forcing him to go down such a dark path. Something that he clearly wouldn't normally do, as indicated by his reaction to his nightmare midway through the film, where he dreams of murdering his wife and son. This indicates that in The Shining, the hotel itself is pushing him on, and we portrayed this in our game as the blood from the elevator, something the hotel is in control of, chasing the player as a motivation for them to keep going. This blood gets closer and closer to the player each time they have to stop at an obstacle, so it acts as an in-game health bar. Also, when animating the blood, we aimed to make it lifelike and to seem like an overbearing and even alive monster, so it looks as though it has a mouth.
We aim to make this into a mobile game where the main interactions would be to tap the screen to attack with the weapon and swipe up to jump. The game is easy to learn whilst also having enough of a challenge to keep the user occupied and interested. When using the weapon, it needs to recharge, so if they have timed it incorrectly, they would need to wait a second or two at the obstacle while the blood edges closer. The obstacles in our game are doors which must be broken with your weapon, and boxes which can be broken for a coin or power-up, or you could also choose to jump over them. Implementing such a feature allows the game to have some quick, procedurally generated areas with random obstacle paths. These force the players to make quick split decisions, and keeps the game fresh. Having power-ups adds depth to the game, enabling users to experience different benefits such as walking faster, giving them an advantage over the blood chasing them. Other items within boxes include collectible coins, which are also used to purchase weapons at the start of the game. There will be a menu system through which the user can select different weapons, each having their own advantages and disadvantages. Each weapon has slightly different stats in terms of range. For example, the chainsaw has a small recharge time, but also a very small range, whereas the spear is the complete opposite. This allows for different playstyles, but still utilizing the core game mechanic. During our reflection process, we have learned a lot about working in groups and overcoming challenges, such as having to work online due to us not being able to meet up. Due to the current situation, our project is not fully polished. However, we do feel that if we had more time, we could make this a successful mobile game that people would enjoy playing.
In a world dominated by COVID-19, the family is forced to stay at home. Which slowly makes them go insane. Situation isolation.
This game was developed by Minoritech. This game is currently a prototype.
Well, there you go everyone. That was just a small look at our studio Minoritech's game known as Situation Isolation. I'm now going to explain the game's overall narrative and how we linked that to our stimulus. So firstly, this project started out as a review of the popular horror film The Shining. Me and the rest of the Minoritech team watched the movie and critiqued its pivotal scenes, including the famous Here's Johnny scene and the scene where he's going insane chasing his wife up the stairs, so that we could think about how to apply these movements to a game, as well as create a compelling narrative that uses The Shining for inspiration. Overall, the story is about two men, Ted and Jim, and their son. Jim and his family haven't spoken in years after they disowned him for marrying another man, until Jim got the news that his mother had passed away, and that he was the family member to inherit the family home from her. This house has been in Jim's family for over 100 generations, spanning 400 years in total. Jim, his husband and their son move into Jim's family home and plan to stay for only a week, whilst they plan to sell the house. However, due to the upcoming coronavirus lockdowns, they are forced to stay in that house for longer than expected, which ultimately leads to the isolation making Jim slowly go insane as he starts to hallucinate dead relatives who are verbally abusing him for his lifestyle, as well as condemning him for trying to sell the family home. Which leads to Jim trying to kill these ghostly figures, but what Jim doesn't know is whilst he's hallucinating and thinks he's lashing out on the ghosts, he's actually hunting his living relatives inside the house. I decided on the narrative having a link to COVID-19 lockdowns mainly because when me and the team looked at the Shining movie, we found that the main reason the father goes insane / crazy is because he is isolated in a hotel with just him, his wife and son, which we thought was very relevant to current world events. And per my research, I found that isolation can lead to mental health conditions like anxiety, depression, etc. that can cause hallucinations, panic attacks, and even stress, which could explain why our main character Jim suddenly snaps. That now leads nicely into talking about our key mechanic, which our lead programmer Kyle will talk to you about now.
So, as you may have put together from Max's narrative design, Ted is our player character. His main task is to escape the house, and to do this, Ted must sneak around the house avoiding his husband Jim, who is trying to kill him. Our main mechanic is based on Jim, the killer's location to the player, as the screen will shake when the killer is near. And the closer the killer is to the player, the more violent the shake will be. As Max explained briefly earlier on, our team critiqued the pivotal scenes of The Shining and how we could apply those movements. So we looked at the scene in the movie where he's chasing his wife up the stairs and is shaking his hands about and sticking his tongue out. We thought this scene's movement showcased his insanity and wanted to portray that in a 2D top-down game, so we opted for the scene vibration to showcase this. So, in order to escape his killer husband, the player needs to also find items that he can use on different areas throughout the map in order to progress. This inventory system works by the player finding the item and walking over to it to add it to their inventory bar. They can use a screwdriver to break the lock on a door, an axe to break the debris throughout the map, and the key to escape the killer and finish the level. Although it is not included in this prototype, we had the ideas and or concepts to have multiple levels linking to different areas of the house, including an outdoor maze scene as a nod / Easter egg to our inspiration, the movie The Shining. Another concept we had was to have eventually the son be able to be found hiding in one of the levels. Another big concept that I know we thought of during the early stages of development was to make it a 2-player local co-op game. However, we thought this lacked the horror element, as the killer player could always see the survivor, which lacked the unknown location of the killer, which our prototype now portrays through the shaking mechanic.
So now, I just want to quickly go over how we first prototyped the game's mechanics. And to do that, we use paper prototyping. And for the images cycling above, you can see we created a rough idea of a map layout, created a few items out of paper, as well as a killer and a player. You should also be able to see now this video we also took trying to portray our shake mechanic, again using the paper prototype. You may have seen also from the videos before that the map is a series of corridors and rooms. However, these titles that I created from the background's prototype are just placeholders. And you may have also seen that the player character in those videos, who are created to look basic, interesting, as well as look at a common person. Although not shown within the game, as we planned for the player to never see the killer, I still designed what Jim would look like. For his design, I took inspiration from the last few scenes of The Shining, where the father is limping, and wanted to be able to show that injury in an image with no animation. So I looked about for other inspiration until the character you see here, who is hunched and has ripped clothing, So I used the hunch for the killer as well as the ripped clothing to show he's been fighting with the ghosts haunting him. Now, I will hand you over to Simon, who's our lead artist, to talk about how these rooms for the full game would look like, as well as why he made those design choices.
Above are some of the main concept art. The main one on the screen now being my house designs, which are based on the Amityville house. Which, if you don't know it, it was a story about a family who moves to an old house in Amityville. They are tormented and tortured by the evil spirits living in the house. My team and I decided to base the house of that horror event, as we believe it is fitting and relates to the narrative Max came up with, of Jimmy being tortured by the hallucination of dead relatives, shouting and abusing him, causing him to lash out. Above are the room designs I did for the games. This will be included in the full game, as we didn't have enough time to create 2D assets that look 3D as drawing from one perspective. Imagery that is 2D but creates the illusion of 3D, making the game look more realistic. I chose to use the 1-point perspective because from this side of the site you can see everything in the room, also giving a sense of space. You can see above my kitchen design for the house, and I wanted to talk quickly about why I designed the kitchen like this. And mainly it's because the house is in a 70s style, as Max detailed in the narration. The 70s was the last time the character's house was renovated, and because the games with Amityville house takes inspiration from 70s for their interior design. I took my inspiration from the images on internet, and I wanted to show the wealthiness of this family by giving a sense of bigger space. I also work on the idea of the title screen that will be shown before the game, including the main house in the background and then the storm in the far background, to portray the horror aspect of the game. I also chose that font design, as the pointy ends could link and represent knives that are linked to the game. Thank you for watching, and we welcome any feedback regarding our games that you can offer us.
Situation Isolation. Coming soon.
Jerry Garcia once said, "Constantly choosing between two evils is still choosing evil." What would you do poses impossible decisions and begs the question of whether a player is being selfish or selfless, and whether either of these is the right path to follow. Our chosen film to inspire the game, Do the Right Thing, investigates the social class, race, and the moral decisions that the character make. They have a direct effect on the way that people interact with each other. The source material climaxes with a neighbourhood riot, which was sparked by an incident of graphic police brutality against a young black man for fighting with a pizzeria owner. This is a social commentary on the effect that race has on police bias, and it is still extremely relevant today. For example, we named our main character Smiley, partially due to the relation to the character in Do the Right Thing, but also as an homage to Smiley culture, who passed away by fault of the UK police force in 2011. Reading about the cases of police brutality in the past 35 years in the UK alone was heartbreaking and eye-opening. The purpose of the film is to bring light to the racial and social imbalance that is not addressed by those in power, that can eventually lead to acts of extreme violence by those who feel powerless. Do the Right Thing managed to uniquely demonstrate the characters reaching the boiling point of dealing with their struggles, through the temperature literally rising in the city throughout the film, with the climax occurring on the hottest day of the year. With this in mind, we want to carry on exploring this theme and make a game that puts pressure on players with a difficult scenario that is timed to replicate the stress. Each member of the rights teams has a distinct role through the process of the development of our prototype. Our game was coded in Twine, as it is a decision-based narrative game that suited this software perfectly. Ali and Logan were in charge of this aspect. The artwork of our game was inspired by a comic book style, and the final illustrations were by Alex and Sophie, with developmental influence from Logan. Finally, Logan and Sophie developed the narrative of the game to create a cohesive story that follows Smiley deciding whether or not to intercept in a case of police brutality. Logan also did a fantastic job implementing sound to engross the player. The key mechanic of What Would You Do is the decision making and multiple choices that the player has when entering each different scene. The gameplay is made more nerve-wracking as the countdown forces the player to make a quick choice. The sounds, visuals, flashing writing and countdown all add to the player experience and creating tension. Our prototype works best on desktop, but should it become a fully fledged game, it would likely be more appealing to players of a mobile game due to its quick paced nature and simplicity visually. We began by brainstorming potential mechanics inspired by gifts from the movie. These included fighting, throwing, burning, choosing, and dancing. Once we settled on choosing as our core mechanic, the team quickly drew up a paper prototype of our game to see any initial flaws within the idea. These tests included playing with people who knew nothing about the game to ensure that the rules made sense to a new player. With a working mechanic in place, Logan and I were able to explore narrative ideas and plots, while Alex and Logan explored potential art styles such as fathism and comic books. Our art style settled on a comic book style because we felt that it replicated the bold choices and sounds that our games included. As previously mentioned, the game was coded using Twine. This is a relatively simple software to learn and allows the player to focus on decision making without masses of other aspects to look at. Twine branches into a tree-like story, linking scenes of said story, which made the organisation of the narrative fairly simple. Upon reflection of the process that we went through to create the prototype, we found quite a few pros, but some cons. The pros of the process included that the Twine prototype looks amazing, includes sounds, colours and a timer. After some adjusting of my art style, Alex and I have created cohesive artwork to go alongside it. We've managed to take what we consider to be the most recognisable points of Do the Right Thing and make a fun game. Lots of research, trial and error, and feedback from outside of the course went into this game to try and make the best user experience possible. The cons, however, included the impact that COVID-19 has had on the team. COVID-19, amongst other factors, has led to extremely difficult communication and therefore perhaps not the most productive group. And it also took a while to completely organise roles, but that may be because we had a vast group for a project that did not necessarily need so many people. Creating a group prototype almost entirely remotely proved to be a challenge, especially in terms of communicating ideas and expectations. But we are proud of the outcome of What Would You Do and look forward to implementing what we learned about self-discipline and the importance of communication in any future projects. We know that police brutality is as much of a pressing issue and sensitive as it was in the 80s, with huge controversies such as the killing of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor. Becoming educated and paying forward what we have learned in this process was likely the most valuable part of creating this game. Author Diane Acker explains that play is the brain's favourite way of learning. So exposing people to impossible decisions involving race, life and death is an engaging way to teach anybody. There is only one question left to ask in this situation. What would you do?
Right, we are... Okay, we're back, but the stream is obviously slightly behind. Okay. All right, cool.
There is only one question left to ask in this situation. What would you do?
Let me press. Need to turn the sound down on this. Okay. All right, welcome back, everyone. I'm going to get to the chat. Obviously, there's been loads of chat. I've been just focusing on watching the videos. I made some notes, kind of. But we want to just like carry on the conversation just for a little bit on the stream in terms of like what you've made. I mean, the thing that I want to do is I know less about what you've been doing throughout the semester, so I'm not going to talk too much. But what I do want to say to everyone that's watching is that to create prototypes of this nature is really, really hard. If you've never used Unity before and you don't know what C# is, then imagine that's your starting place, and in 5 weeks' time, you're expected to code a game. Every year, I'm impressed by the level that the students go to, and I think the other thing that's really impressive here is the depth of the research. That's more important. And also, I mean, some people are saying, oh, worried about the audio in their videos and things. Like, you literally had a day to make video essays, and we're not teaching you film production or even video editing. So they were amazing, and the importance of those videos is the reflection on your projects and the idea of like sitting back and saying, okay, what did work, what have we done? And what I noticed in all those videos is that I think you should all be amazed with the amount of work you've done. You know, we push our students anyway when they're in the studios 5 days a week. When we're doing most of this remote and we're pushing you just as hard, you've done just as well. So I would be really proud of the semester that you've had, you know, and all the work that you've undertaken, especially as this last project was really mainly lockdown. So yeah, I think there was so much good stuff. I mean, I'll just talk generally and then I'll let Emma maybe talk about some things, and people can post questions in the stuff. I mean, the fact that you guys covered the police brutality was amazing. You know, to try and tackle those kind of issues is really hard, and to think about it in gameplay was great. And I think there was a comment at the end about the thing you appreciated the most was learning about the history and finding out the things that have been going on that shouldn't be going on. So, you know, and again, that's great. You know, there was a whole comments about trial and error, things failing. There was comments from other teams about the fact that they suddenly realized that things were too complicated, and so they changed, they iterated, which is again a massively important skill in game making. Lots of testing I heard, which is great, even remotely, which again, for those on the stream who may not realize, when you're building a game in Unity, it's all right to build it on your computer, but to get it to other people to be able to test and that kind of thing is a big thing. It's not easy. It sounds easy, but it's not. So the fact that we're able to test things is, you know, with others was great. So, you know, and I thought there was some great prototypes. They looked amazing. I want to play them, obviously. I know that that's again going to be tricky because I need to get to your computers with the things on. But yeah, I think well done, everyone. I think, again, you've got a week to your hand in. I think reflect upon what you've learned. You know, I think you'll be amazed with where you're at in terms of not just skills, in terms of like making prototypes, but the real skills, research, design thinking, idea creation. And that this is just the start of that journey, you know, of being curious about things. So I would take, you know, be really positive and be really proud of yourselves. I think that's what I want to say, you know. Emma, I think that's all I'm going to say, you know, in terms of just being positive, you know, and we can take questions in the chat because now I can look at it. But Emma, maybe you want to kind of take over for the last bit. And if any students want to join audio wise, then you can, you know what to do. but well done.
Yeah, just to echo Adam, I think you should all be really proud of yourselves because, yeah, it's not been smooth sailing, but what you've managed to produce, and more than that, like as Adam said, like the way that you're able to reflect on the process itself, on the actual journey, as well as the end product, I think is really the key thing. I took some individual notes for each group, which I'll go through really, really quickly. But yeah, and then I think that won't take me more than 2 minutes. And I think if you guys at the end, maybe the discussion question for us all to think about, because it was common to every single group and is probably going to be the reality going forward, is how can we improve communication and teamwork? Obviously, we talked about things like using management software, but there's not always a software solution for everything. So I think, yeah, while I'm talking, maybe just have a little reflection on what you think we can do to be better at fostering that kind of studio spirit, team spirit. Because I think, again, as you guys seen, like, you're all people that you all should want to work with. You all are bringing amazing artistic skill, you're all bringing amazing narrative ideas, and you're all bringing your coding prowess to the table. So yeah, you should be excited about working with each other and keen to work with each other. So because yeah, game design is not a solo sport. It's not yoga, it's not swimming, it's a team sport, it's football. No, it's not. My point is that it should be exciting, the prospect of working with each other. So we just need to make sure that we can make it happen in a way that's like as easy and as effective as possible. So something to think about while I quickly give some feedback on each of the videos. So beginning with the Sapling Studio. First of all, I just want to say, Dylan, I think you may have a future in voice acting for like Critical Role, D&D style stuff, because the opening thing, I was like, that is the voice of an evil warlock or whatever in some fantasy video game. So, a potential part of your game design career may well be being a voice actor. I thought that you had a really good pace when you were talking. You were really clear in what you were conveying. And the only thing I would say is, like, in terms of the audio mix, would be to lower the volume of the music a little bit, but that's just like a really small comment. I really, obviously, the prototype that you built was great in terms of like, grey boxing and everything. It did everything that it needed to. It was really clear. And also the fact that you had a completed puzzle, the completed level, was really super impressive. I like the character art as well. I thought that was looked like it could be really effective, especially the kind of backdrop stuff. I thought was really, really good as well as the character art. The one thing I'm kind of wondering about is how is the function of the suspicion mechanic. So is it going to work in the sense that the more suspicious the father it becomes, the fewer dialogue options you have? Or basically, how is the suspicion meter going to function to express his paranoia on a mechanical level? So obviously you could have like a visual meter that goes up and down, but it would be interesting to see how that translates to a mechanic. So whether that's removing choices or shortening the time that you have to answer, to pick a choice or whatever, I think that would be interesting to pursue. From an art perspective, I thought maybe you could use, again, this is just your prototype, and as I said, the prototype did everything that it needed to, but if you were going to take the project forward, you might want to experiment with scale. So to create a sense of greater vulnerability on the part of the player, you can actually make the player proportionately much smaller and the environment much bigger. Again, not being realistic, but just tweaking that realism. And that will create more of a sense of menace and threat, and also it gives you more a feeling of playing from the perspective of a 9-year-old if everything's at that height. And also someone else pointed this out, but I really liked the description wooden smile. I thought that was like great writing there. So overall I thought it was excellent. I thought they were all excellent, so that's great.
Yeah, and I think, Emma, I was going to say on that one, and all of them actually, to get some of the animation working quite smoothly as it is in Unity, again, is like quite hard. Yeah. So I just, again, impressed with the level of the prototypes. And remember, these are prototypes to try out an idea. And again, I think what everyone said was that they had other ideas they've got in their sketchbooks and whatever that have come out of making the prototype. And that, again, is something to bear in mind. The more prototypes you can make, the more you can refine or transform your ideas, and that will come into big play next semester.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I thought so. Intuos Mortuus. I really liked how you linked the film to the game. It was really good, in-depth film crit more than anything, and then also the way that you translated that into a game was exactly what the brief was. So that was really, really impressive.
Yeah.
Particularly like the black and white color kind of point, because yeah, I think that is really evocative, and it's quite simple. It's great wordless communication. You know, I love me some wordless communication with the player. I thought you also reflected really well on, as Adam said, the process of coming up with this quite complex idea and then realizing that for this project and for this brief, you were going to have to pare that down quite significantly. So I appreciated like the kind of thought process and also how you laid it out really clearly in the video. I really like that you considered accessibility. And again, your video also had subtitles, which is kind of an extension of that. Yeah, I thought the selection of visual footage that you used to accompany the voiceover was great. You know, it really added to what you were saying and was, yeah, was very engaging. And yeah, I think so. From a mechanical perspective, I think we've already talked as well about these physics puzzles, but it really reminds me a lot of like Limbo, that kind of puzzle platform slash, yeah, slightly spooky, slightly creepy game. So I think what you guys can think of, again, you're not taking this project forward, but I love Limbo. I think it's a fantastic game. But one thing I would say is that some of the puzzles lack, you almost have that ludonarrative dissonance thing where they don't actually expand upon the story. And that's part of like Playdead's whole aesthetic, which is like, is there a story? I don't know. We're going to leave that to the player to decide. But yeah, so you might want to think about what does it mean to like grow larger and shrink down. And again, you don't have to do a very direct meaning. I think it's actually better to leave some ambiguity about it. But yeah, you might want to pick a visual frame of reference. The one that obviously comes to mind is Alice in Wonderland with the kind of eat me, drink me, to change size and stuff like that. And again, you don't have to explain why that relates to the kind of narrative arc that you set out, but you can give these kind of metaphor style hints that connects mechanic to narrative. So again, just something to think about going forward. But yeah, fantastic that you guys got a whole puzzle completed, that you managed to model it. You know, I think your sprites are super cute. I really like that style. So yeah, you did really well.
Yeah, the sprites were cute. I did like that. But
yeah,
I mean, again,
really.
It was the research that really helped develop that. You know, I think at the beginning that you talked about reading an essay on the director, you know, and that informing some of your choices. So I think again, it's just reflecting on that, say, okay, what really brought the innovation and the excitement to the projects for you? And I think you'll find it's by going and looking and investigating and, well, doing what the module says, which is investigate and instigate, you know, of all these ideas. So yeah, well done.
Yeah, really, really good. Yeah, I think, like I said, the kind of critical reflection was really strong in the voiceover that you gave. Overlooked content. So yeah, I think again, like the art that you showed was really, really evocative, especially like the animations of Jack Nicholson. But also, yeah, like people pointed out in the chat that you included the iconic wall finishings and carpet patterns from the original film. It was just a really nice touch. I thought maybe in the video it would have been good to have, just to kind of tighten it a little bit, would be to remove some of the footage of showing the prototype or to match the voiceover to that footage. But again, that's just a small thing, and that's about video essays, not about game design. So yeah, I thought it was really good to see your ideation process as well. And I think, again, like with the other group, the fact that you were able to recognize that it was a really, you know, a really cool game idea that you came up with, but it wasn't right in terms of a fit for this project because it was just too complex. And again, I love the idea of a hotel management game where you have to try and eat the patrons. I think that's really appealing. But yeah, obviously you guys recognize that building a management type game was not going to be doable, and so I think it was a good choice to flip to the Endless Runner instead. Loved like the idea or like the analysis he did of the blood and talking about how you could make what is essentially a non-sentient liquid feel more like a monster. And I think that's like the real birth of all of the great video game monsters you see, is like somebody having a really innovative idea. Like, what would blood look like if it was alive and had a mouth? And yeah, kind of from that thought process that you get very original, scary monsters. I thought that was really good. Yeah, and finally, I loved like the creepy caretaker bit. That the vibe was very evocative of the film. And yeah, finally, the adding the weapon choice I think is great as well, because it turns what's essentially like a reflex game. It adds a layer of strategy to a Twitch game essentially. So yeah, I think that's really good to bring a bit of interest to something that's so it makes it more than just like a tapper. It makes it more than a Twitch game. It makes it a strategic thinking game. So yeah, I thought that was a really good design choice there. Yeah, Minoritech again. Max, you and Dylan, I think both have voiceover careers ahead of you. Maybe yours is more in like the American film trailer market, but yeah, no, I thought like, yeah, it was really, really good performance. Yeah, I really liked how you also reference contemporary events. And again, even when you're making any kind of art product or project, I mean, not product, artistic endeavor, even if you think that you're making a game about, I don't know, magpies, you can't help but have your current contemporary context like seep into that in some way. There's no way you can separate the context that the game is produced in from the game that comes out of it. There's no such thing as a game built in a vacuum. So I think acknowledging the fact that your contemporary experience and your contemporary insights do shape what you produce in a creative sense is really strong. I like how you laid out the video to show individual contributions. I thought that was effective. It does seem like a really intense game in the sense that it's got this very dark narrative, you know, about homophobic violence and so on. And again, like with Do the Right Thing, I think it's really important to research those things outside of just gaming as well, because there's been so much written about, as someone said, don't you dare kill the gay. And I think the kill the queers trope is one that video games should definitely be ready to move beyond. I mean, we moved beyond it in Gone Home in 2014, but yeah, and also there's like a whole bit of literary research and film research which is about spectrality, which means like ghostliness essentially, and queerness. And yeah, the person to look to for that is Catherine Stockton Bond, but there's also loads of other queer theorists who write about that. So again, like an amazing way to enrich that experience, enrich the game, I mean, and in terms of the gameplay, would be to dive deeper into that. All of that writing that's been being written since the 60s, and all of those films that have been made from that queer perspective, which would, yeah, really be great to see. I think it's a good idea not to co-op, because situation isolation, I think it's good to be isolated and to have it as a really solitary experience, and part of the scariness is that you're doing it all by yourself. Yeah, I think like the cool thing was it did make me think of something like Gone Home or What Remains of Edith Finch, but that with a mashup with Alien Isolation. So you have like Gone Home Isolation or whatever. But yeah, I think that's a cool genre mashup. I don't know if you guys like meant this, but when you showed the shaking effect with the paper prototype, it changed the locations of the items.
Yes.
And I was like, that's great. Like that would be really cool. Obviously, you can't explain it on a narrative level because it's a supernatural thing. But I thought that would be an added challenge to the player if they were carefully, you know, creeping along the corridor to get this screwdriver, and then the enemy gets too close to them, the shaking gets too much, and the screwdriver now slips to another location. Could be extremely frustrating, but it could also be a fun game mechanic. But yeah, and then just a comment on the art. So yeah, I think it's really great to take inspiration from real world happenings, so the Amityville Horror House. Yeah, I think things always feel more authentic and more thought through when you can root them in those real world examples and take inspiration from them, because yeah, I think it's easy to slip into cliche when you're writing horror and haunted house stuff, isn't it? Because we all have watched so many films, played so many games, read so many books from that genre, that I think actually returning to the materiality of real world events can bring like a freshness to that stuff. Otherwise you end up like Quentin Tarantino, where you're basically all of your creative output is just mashup homage of other films that you've seen. Finally, but last but not least, definitely not least, writings with the What Would You Do? So again, as Adam said, like it's so important that we think about games in terms of their historical and political impact, as well as in terms of like, are they fun or not? Because yeah, I think fun would be like the wrong word to describe a game like this. So I think it's really, yeah, as you said, it's so important to be able to have like the sensitivity and the realization that telling these stories in game form or in any form requires a lot of research and a lot of education, and again at some points maybe even recognizing that, you know, it's not your story to tell necessarily, and that you need to find other ways to engage with the topic and that kind of thing. So I think the level of research that you did and the fact that you used all of these contemporary sources was really, really important. It seems like you guys worked really well together as a team. I don't know if like there's a prize for like teamwork makes the dream work, but I got a sense that you were one of the like the most successful teams in terms of your collaboration. I think that you have a really strong art style is also really important, because I think that can make the Twine experience feel really cohesive and give it an aesthetic, basically, because obviously Twine is not a visual medium. So the fact that you went with that comic book definitive recognizable style, I thought was really, really good choice there. Just from a video editing perspective, like a little bit of background music while you were talking, so it would have been like something that could have added to it, but again, that's about video editing and not about your game. And yeah, I would have liked to seen a whole like playthrough from start to beginning, like from start to beginning, start to end of your game would have been really cool. But I'm sure, yeah, yours will probably be one of the easiest ones to share and play through. So, but yeah, overall, I'm super impressed with everyone. I think you've got some really, really good, really like, yeah, just work that you should be proud of. And if anyone has any thoughts about teamwork, communication, running studios virtually and remotely, either put them in the chat or hop on the call and just share your ideas, because I think that's our main hurdle going forward.
It definitely is going to be a big one. I think I just want to wrap up while people maybe put in chat and stuff, and we'll probably finish at 12:30. There's some conversations here about, you know, ensuring that we make games that showcase other things. I think this is really important. So one of the reasons the program exists is because we think, as educators in the game space, that games are pieces of culture, and pieces of culture obviously impact people in more ways than them just having fun. You know, and so the context of our current lived situation obviously has impacts. We just talked about that in the critical contextual studies module, and how that history influences culture and the things that make us create. So I think, you know, carry on to step into that mold. That's fine. You know, research is so key. I think, again, you know, in semester 2, look at how can I get that depth of research really quickly, you know. So it'll be digging out some of the things outside of the game space that maybe influence what you're thinking. And of course, the iteration of the ideas. And I think it's great that you try to tackle things, you know, in the commercial game space. And again, I get myself in trouble probably. You know, representation is the easy way to try and tackle some things, but there's other ways of doing it, and I think you guys have been trying to do other ways and thinking about how do we add some depth to this that isn't just about putting a character in a game that we haven't seen or we don't often see, you know. And again, like Emma said, there is also making sure that you're sensitive to the subject, getting the research, talking to the right people, and in semester 2 we got some really great guests coming in to work directly with the first years that are doing this. So I can't talk about that now because this is a live stream and it may be inappropriate. But as many of you on the stream will know, one of the things that we really try and do on the course is get people in that try and do different things with games. And we're injecting a bunch of those more into the first year than we have before, which is excellent. And so I would encourage everyone to take on those challenges that they've been discussing about how you kind of take games to do different things. So we're not making another FIFA or Call of Duty, although they're obviously well-selling games, and I'm sure the Frostbite engine is great. Okay, that's all I want to say, really. I think that's my main notes. Well done, everyone. I'm impressed.
Me too.
Okay, so if there are any more questions, pop them in the chat. I think we're talking about teamwork. There's some things we can do. I mean, I'm on a call later on today about branding within games, and they've got like a virtual space where you can sort of meet and you walk around and chat to people, which looks interesting. I'm having conversations with some companies that are making some unique software for promoting games remotely. So similar to this, but like how do you make it even more interactive in terms of allowing people to play? Obviously, we can start to look at how we get your prototypes tested, but we've got, again, I mean, it's no surprise if you've talked to any second and third years, the next project is a board game project. The outcome has to revolve around a tabletop game. And so we've got in place already.
For everybody.
Yeah, and we've got in place already some things so that you can do that remote testing using digital tools. And so that'll be part of that. So yeah, I think if we just keep the communication open and try and work out different tools and things that we can use in your groups for the next project, then, and also keep us in the loop. If you think that communication is starting to not work, how might we do it? So, good.
Yes, a tabletop game.
Yes, tabletop game. That's what I always, yes, it's more interesting than just a board.
That's where your evil warlock voice skills are going to shine.
Yeah, that's true. Okay, cool. Right, well, I think that is done. Everyone's now getting excited about tabletop games or wondering what that is. But yeah, I mean, it's no secret. You talk to second and third years what the projects are that are coming up, roughly. All right, cool. So we're going to end the stream there. I will put the stream on the Game Design Art channel, which everyone should have a link to, so you can review the stream if you want. In particular, maybe some of the commentary, those kind of things, or just to reflect upon your own video essays. But obviously, you've got your own copies of those, so you can watch them in your own leisure. And then look out this afternoon for more information about how the hand-in is going to work and kind of the things that relate to your summative assessment. So yes, well done everyone. Great. I don't think this went wrong, which is amazing. Occasionally you saw me and Emma in between the videos because I was like behind on the delay, and that was like, and then you see me leaning into my computer. But other than that, technically it worked. I mean, I'm probably get slammed for the font choice at some point, but there we go. All right, so well done everyone. Take a break, get some lunch. Thank you to everyone that joined the stream and contributed to the commentary. Yeah, thanks very much. Let me press stop. Where's